The views and opinions of this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading.
Make sure to subscribe to the Market Talk YouTube channel. You can watch our latest interviews with top market analysts in the country, find bonus content, and much more. It's easy. Just go to youtube.com/@MarketTalkAg and hit the subscribe button. Or you can search for Market Talk Ag on YouTube.
Well, as we continue our analysis of the USDA reports out on Thursday, quarterly grain stocks, prospective plantings. Again, that corn acre number was below expectations, 90 million. Soybeans pretty much in line. And the wheat number was a little bit higher, but still just a lot of things to take a look at here. Corn and Chicago wheat had a pretty good day Thursday to end the month and end the quarter here with the numbers. We're going to go through things. Joining us now, Brian Doherty, Senior Market Advisor at Total Farm Marketing. Brian, happy to have you on the show here today as we recap all the fun and fireworks from USDA report day, end of the month, end of the quarter, as the dust settles here. Not a bad way to end the month of March, Brian.
That was a mouthful. Yeah. there's a lot of data today, right? A lot of numbers. Yeah. And so the market moves into these with anticipation and position squaring or whatever you want to call it. Then the market has the numbers and then it deals with the numbers. And then usually by the end of the day, you got a pretty good feel for it. And I think the market responded appropriately. You got a corn acreage number that was a surprise and a stocks number that was less than the average estimate. Mm-hmm. And you kind of put those two together by my math. If we 2 million acres less, that's very round numbers, 150 bushels an acre, just round numbers. That's 300 million bushels, and then about 100 million on the stocks. So about a 400 million bushel swing. You're going to get some support usually in a case like that, and we saw that. Corn didn't waste any time, jumping up about 20 cents. And then I think, and this is a guess on my part, but I think there were a lot of farmers who felt pretty badly the last few days about not having corn sold the last time it rallied up in this area. I'm guessing there were a lot of trigger orders up there that got hit, or farmers just sold some corn today just to sell a rally and gain that daily victory. So good numbers on corn. I would say I would call the numbers neutral on wheat or beans, and I guess I'd call them neutral on wheat too, about as expected. But corn was the big winner today. It's not a game changer, but it certainly changes the trend and projection of carryout, and does make one pause a little bit, thinking, well, what if this El Nino does flip to La Nina? And what if we don't have good weather? And this and that. So long-winded, but yeah, some big numbers today and big reports.
Yeah, well, and thinking about this too, as you kind of looked at all the numbers, the dust settles, and we plug things into the balance sheets and more. On corn, that May contract, I think, got a close above the 50-day for the first time since October, I feel like. And so I think, to your point, Brian, saw some farmers selling, maybe some fund short covering here. It looked like the fund activity was pretty substantial in corn as well on Thursday. So I guess for me, and I'll ask you, as we get into next week, we got a 3-day weekend now. What could we maybe think about if there's any follow through, things like that? I mean, all of this kind of resets the goalpost, so to speak, for us for a few months, doesn't it, Brian?
It does. So instead of some sort of a negative report pile driving the market down and really, reflecting this endless supply, all of a sudden you have to pause a little bit and think, now that these reports are behind the market, though, the market's going to search for news, and there's not much on tap in the short term. Mm-hmm. So you'll see the market reflect maybe the idea of planting progress, what kind of pace that it'll be. Prices did, to your point, we saw the May contract close above the 50-day moving average for the first time since fall. So you're right on that. And if you think about that, it's the average price for 50 days. So when you're above that, there's a little bit of a momentum change there. So instead of the down, now it's sideways, maybe a little higher. How weather goes in the planting season might actually determine more or less acres. So right now, the 6 to 10 day does show pretty much the entire Midwest below normal in precipitation. Looks like it's going to be a little cool, but probably nothing to inhibit a good start to the plant compared to. You got to compare it to something. Let's say we just had a really wet pattern out there the market might get more excited. I don't see that wet pattern right now.
Looking a little closer at some of these numbers, I know drops in the corn acreage over 300,000 acres. Some of the key I states were on that list: Iowa,
Mhm.
Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, South Dakota. We look at these numbers as a whole, and I just wonder, I mean, your thoughts where some of these acres maybe shifted to a little bit, Brian? I mean, just everything from spring wheat to durum to cotton, you name it. Any thoughts, any chatter on where maybe some of these acres have kind of moved around a little bit from just beyond what we could see on the surface, Brian?
Sure. So let's just review on the surface. Basically, we saw corn acres disappear to bean acres and some wheat acres disappear. So where do they go, right? Well, in that 500,000 acre window for cotton, and then highly probable into specialty type crops, in particular in the fringe areas. What was interesting though, with the drier fall that was experienced, and corn prices still holding at a pretty good level into the October window, that it seemed like field work was rapidly advanced and really kind of kept the farmers into the rotation. But we did see some of that switch out of the I states. Now, what I think that is reflective of, or some of the core states, that's a reflection of just what it costs to grow corn. And the idea, I want to go to a least costly alternative. And that's not everybody. It's a small percentage, but you only need a small percentage change for 1 million acres. So if you get 90 million acres, 1/90th is a small percentage, or 2/90th. So it's not every cornfield you drive by. It's 1 out of 100 or 2 out of 100 that may have gone to beans. So that's the reflection that I would have, is that from a cost perspective, when you look ahead, it looks like it could be an expensive year. It's not unusual for human nature to kick in, and for many people to kind of think about a less costly alternative.
Okay. Yeah, and that's good thoughts there for sure. And those quarterly stocks numbers, I'll just pull those up on our video feed real quick.
There you go.
But again, those, I mean, I think all of that not surprising just with the way the acreage numbers were, Brian. I mean, I know corn was down some, I think 80 million, and beans and wheat were up 17, but I think this all kind of comes into what you've been talking about here as we kind of reset the goalposts a little bit.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say today's reports are a game changer, but the interesting thing on corn, I think a lot of people were holding their breath, thinking, "Oh boy, what if we don't see farmers shave much off of corn? What does that really look like for ending stocks? And do we push the envelope of 2.5, 2.6 on carryout?" And probably right now, even with 181 yield, even though we lost acres, you're probably still looking at maybe a couple 100 million bushel increase to carry out around 2.4. So it's not time to get all celebratory on this idea that corn prices are in a position to just rally and be a bull market. But certainly enough reflection has to come back to say, we just kind of put a little dent in the side of the bear's argument here. And if you throw a little weather at it, that dent's going to get bigger pretty quick.
Yeah, very, very true. I don't want weekly export sales to get lost in the shuffle here for us, Brian. It looked like we had another active week on the grain side. I know on the pork side, it was a marketing year high. So
Mhm.
overall, weekly export sales numbers, anything big stand out to you there?
Well, we continue to see just a really good, solid number in corn. And we were at a figure today again where, when you look at the big picture, we're running a little bit ahead of what the USDA has been projecting. And then quarterly stocks were down today. So that's the one thing I want to point out. Now, the other thing I want to point out, though, is that we have to be a little careful not to get too excited about that, because typically, if it looks like this safrinha corn crop is going to come into play, we start to see exports slow, and that's a newer phenomenon the last several years. 10 years ago, the safrinha corn crop was half of what it is now. So it's been a game changer there. But as far as the big picture, export sales, I still kind of concern myself with this whole soybean. 9.7 million today in the old crop. That just wasn't strong enough to get me excited. And although beans tried to rally, they just couldn't follow through. But corn at 47.5, that got me excited. If we did that every week, you're close to 50 million, we'd be way above the USD expectations. So that's a pretty good number today.
We are talking with Brian Doherty, Senior Market Advisor at Total Farm Marketing, here on the show today. Brian, let's jump over to livestock real quick, just to get some thoughts there. I mentioned that marketing year high on pork export sales. The beef number was up a bit. Kind of mixed, though, on the day in livestock in terms of hogs and feeders. I think hogs may be a little cautious ahead of the quarterly hogs and pigs numbers, while live cattle had some triple-digit gains. So, I mean, not overall, not a bad day across the protein sector, it felt like, Brian.
Well, we talked about, well, I think we've talked about this, but if you look at the cutout values in cattle and, holding around 300 plus in both choice and select. So while the market maybe sold off on a heavy cattle on feed report, maybe some technical selling and general concerns of what does this avian flu mean and how does that impact? And nobody seems to know, but the market shed some positions really quickly and broke under some major support. But I take a day like today, and it's just, I think, just a real testament that this is a reflection today of, hey, the board sold off, but cash didn't hardly budge, or cash is holding right in there. And the board recovered today. Maybe more impressive after a pretty harsh downturn, in my book, harsh downturn. Feeders finished higher today despite a surge in corn prices. So that told me the feeder market probably is undervalued, got beat up a little too hard. August feeders were recently trading above 270, but just couldn't really punch above that, and then took it on the chin here and got down under 258. But the supply isn't going to change much, so it's whether or not the marketplace comes in and buys. I was at a cattle just a small sale barn on Saturday, and calves were sparse and the calves were high. So I don't see, there's what's on paper here with the reports, and then there's the reality of going to the auction and seeing people buy what's there and bid up for it.
No, that's a great point. You mentioned the bird flu in dairy cattle. Obviously, that's been a big news item here this week in the livestock trade and in the dairy market too. As we kind of watch things unfold here, what's your thoughts on the overall impact in the dairy market that this has had here this week, Brian?
None. Zero. The market factored it in for a day or so and then went right back to its same old. And that's kind of the confusing part about this, because on the one hand, you saw live cattle prices really take a bit of a hit. And the talk was, well, the avian bird flu, we don't know how extensive it is. What's that going to do to the cattle supply? And it was actually, I think the concern is in dairy cows and the panhandle in particular. And the milk market still pushed in another round of new lows this week. The cheese market continues to be somewhat inept. Little gains today, but the overall trend is down. You've got a $1.42 area on those barrels and blocks. And again, that would tell us the board itself. Gosh, you'd hate to think this, but April at about $15.50 is still considered somewhat overpriced. So you just need to see that demand kick in. And I just don't know how to put my hands around that, whether it's just worries about global economic supplies, the Red Sea, and getting, product to where it has to get. If that's the issue, if it's the foreign countries and U.S. citizens just don't have as much, money as we think, the stock market continues to blow higher. Well, not everybody's in the stock market, right? So you got a lot of people out there living paycheck to paycheck, and maybe that's, where we're just not seeing that sort of stronger demand come right pouring in, despite really good value. Now, give some credit to the back months continue to hold well, but they're gradually starting to eke lower, and that's a concern. But what that has done too, Jesse, it has put premium to the back months, and that tells the producer, hang on. So they may not be liquidating as much, and we saw that on the February production report.
All right, Brian, I want to give you some. Yeah. I want to give you some room for final thoughts here real quick. Again, a busy day. 3-day holiday weekend in front of us here with Good Friday and the Easter holiday. So I guess final takeaways for you. What do you want producers to remember here as they look at their marketing heading through a holiday weekend and into the month of April and planting season, Brian?
Yeah, great point. So here's what I'd like producers to remember. We saw something today that really, I don't think many people were looking for, and the market went up. That's the case in the market just about all the time. Sometimes there's very little change in a day, sometimes impactful change. So the message that I'd like to push today is just preparation. Be prepared. Think about the different scenarios that can pan out. What does it look like this summer for corn? So I was looking at and wrote a small article on the El Nino to La Nina potential. Well, what does that look like? So everybody I'm talking to says, geez, if I could just get $5 corn, I'd sell everything, right? Well, you know how that goes. You sell everything and then the market does just roll higher. So if you do that, and that's a responsible sell, then how do you get yourself covered to not only benefit from a rally, but then have the confidence to sell more? So I would just try to make the argument that when you're doing your field work and working hard, don't take your eye off the ball of marketing, and think about scenario planning and different tools to fit those different scenarios.
Well, Brian, if folks have questions, I know they can reach out to you and the team there at Total Farm Marketing in multiple ways. How can they get a hold of you, Brian?
Yeah, 3 ways that I will pass along. One is our 800 number and call in, and I'm Brian with a Y, so 800-334-9779, Jesse. Otherwise, Brian with a Y at totalfarmmarketing.com. That's an email. Or look at our website, totalfarmmarketing.com, and you can navigate through there and connect with us. Or if you want to send me a message, you can do that through that site too. Happy to take any and all calls, questions. There are no, as they say, there are no dumb or stupid questions. Everything is important, and we want to hear it.
Brian Doherty with Total Farm Marketing. Always a pleasure, sir. Have a great Easter weekend. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Jesse, thank you, and same to you.
Appreciate it. Brian Doherty there with Total Farm Marketing. We're out of time. Find us at markettalkag.com. I'm Jesse Allen. Have a great afternoon.